The old data said the average person will change careers 5 to 7 times during their working life. With the economic volatility and the ever-increasing number of career choices, 30% of the workforce will now change careers or jobs every 12 months. My question to you is, how many jobs have you had? And when was the last time you changed jobs? Do you remember how it felt when you made that decision to get a new job? Were you glad to be done with the old job and glad for a new challenge and opportunity? Or were you forced out and had to get a new job? Whatever the circumstances, changing jobs and careers is a major decision. It impacts you on so many different levels. First, and obviously, it impacts you financially. Typically, we want a new job to pay us more than what we were getting paid before. But you know as well as I do, that isn't always the case. Again, in this volatile economy, you might need to take a lesser paying job, especially if the job you have now is not likely to be available for you in the future. Second, changing jobs impacts who you are and the people you relate to on the job. We often spend more time with people at work than we do with some of our own family members. When you change jobs, those relationships change, and so does your standing as a worker. You become the new guy or the new gal, and people are trying to evaluate you and figure you out. Again, if the present work situation is hostile and sucking the life out of you, a change of any kind might be seen as a benefit. Third, a change of job might mean relocating your family to another part of the city or state or maybe even out of state. A career change like that has huge implications for your family, especially if you have kids at home. So it is obvious that a new job is extremely disruptive. And this won't come as a surprise to you. Jesus is in the business of disrupting people's lives, but for their good. When Jesus called James and John from their family and fishing occupation, the decision to follow Jesus was huge, economically, relationally, and even geographically. And here comes Philip to his friend Nathanael, also known as Bartholomew. And Philip is in essence calling Nathanael to leave what he was doing and join Philip in following Jesus. It was like being offered to be part of a brand new business, getting in on the ground floor of a new venture. Usually, new businesses are high commitment and high risk, but the promise is for even higher reward if it works out. But that little word is tough to get around. If encapsulates the totality of the risk. Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem entitled If. He said this: "If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you will fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son." If implies risk and uncertainty. If implies faith and hope and courage. Nathanael was faced with the biggest if of his life. Would he take the risk with faith and hope? But Nathanael had questions that he needed answered if he was going to follow Jesus. In John chapter 1, verse 45, it says this: "Philip found Nathanael and said to him, 'We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph.'" Nathanael must have thought, if this is true, then all my hopes and dreams have come true. But there is a big if, especially when Philip includes the origin of Jesus, a town called Nazareth. Nazareth was about 25 miles from Bethsaida, as the crow flies, and about 35 miles on the road. It would take about a day or so to get from one town to the other. So Nathanael would probably know something of the town of Nazareth. In John chapter 1, verse 46, it says this: "Nathanael said to him, 'Can anything good come out of Nazareth?' Philip said to him, 'Come and see.'" Often people ask if Nathanael was a skeptic and a cynic for asking that question. So was Nathanael a skeptic, a cynic? Maybe. But since Jesus is about to say some really nice things about Nathanael, I think a kinder interpretation of Nathanael's words might be in order. Dr. Martin Luther teaches about the eighth commandment to put the better construction on people's words. We should try interpreting what people say in the kindest and most positive and polite way. Was Nathanael's question a cynical and prejudicial statement? If it was, well, then Nathanael's question was an error of logic. Maybe some people, even most of the people, weren't good in Nazareth, but that doesn't mean that all the people were no good. A kinder interpretation of Nathanael's question may be that, in general, Nazarenes weren't that good, but it was a question and not a judgment. And that he was willing to consider that the general belief of the no goodness of the people of the city of Nazareth might not be totally true is evidence that he was open to the possibility of something good coming out of that city. Nathanael was willing to go and see. Now my question to you is, how open are you to accepting evidence that might change your view or judgment of others? We are embroiled in rampant errors in logic in our country and culture, making hasty generalizations of a whole group or class of people based on the actions of just a few. Are all police bad because of a few? Is a whole nation condemned because of the action of their leaders? Is a whole race lumped together as a homogeneous whole because of a few bad boys and girls? No, I don't think prejudice was the motive for Nathanael's questions. I say this because Nathanael was a devout Jew that Jesus spoke about, a true Israelite, and knowledgeable about the Old Testament and the prophecies concerning the coming Messiah. So I think a theological explanation is more appropriate. And then, rather than a prejudicial interpretation of the view of Nazareth, why was Nathanael skeptical about the Messiah coming from the town of Nazareth? Well, theologically, first, Nathanael probably didn't know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Nathanael, as a student of the Bible, was looking for the Messiah to come from the town of Bethlehem, as it says in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. He probably assumed that if Jesus was from Nazareth, then he must have been born there, and therefore could not be the one spoken of in the prophecy, since the Messiah had to be born in Bethlehem. Also, on the other hand, Nazareth was considered a small, insignificant village, perhaps only having a population of a few poor families with no notable worth, even being imported or exported. Kind of like a hick town of today with only one store and no stoplights. Nathanael could have been like the wise men who assumed Jesus would have been born in the capital city, Jerusalem. Nathanael may have had a hard time and be hard-pressed to believe that anything of importance, especially that of the birth of the Messiah, would come from such a small and irrelevant community. I'm not exactly sure why Nathanael was less than impressed with Jesus being from Nazareth, but Nathanael showed good character by asking it as a question and not making a hasty judgment and stating as fact that no good things comes from the town. Here we come to one of the main lessons in discipleship that we learn from the disciple Nathanael. He was teachable. He was willing to go and see Jesus and check things out for himself. He was open to changing his mind. But what about you? How teachable are you? Are you willing to let new information allow you to make a new decision? Ask yourself, when was the last time I really changed my mind? Nathanael was willing to change his mind about Nazareth by examining the evidence. It's a big thing to open the possibility that you may have made a wrong conclusion. It's a big thing to change your mind. I think there is immense pressure on all of us to always have everything all figured out, to have this systematic approach to our lives that leads us to exactly where we want to be. How many times growing up did someone ask you, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I don't know what you said when you were a kid, but I bet very few of you didn't change your mind about the kind of job you would eventually have. High school kids are so tired of adults asking, "What college are you going to? What are you going to major in? What kind of job are you going to get after college?" Kids may have an idea now, but should be willing to re-examine that decision as they mature and gather more information and insight. Nathanael was teachable. He was willing to change his mind about the people of Nazareth by first-hand experience and the evidence presented to him. He asked the question and didn't make it a statement embedded in concrete. He would indeed come and see for himself. Making a new decision based on new information is more difficult than it sounds. To some people, it means admitting they were wrong. But making the right decision is more important than our pride. Good people need to know the truth about Jesus. Nathanael went from being an Old Testament believer that the Messiah would come to a New Testament believer in the Messiah who had come, and was with Nathanael right there. Nathanael might have had an error in logic to begin with by assuming that nothing good could come from the town of Nazareth. But he did the logical and rational thing and went to examine the evidence firsthand. How many people who were skeptical of Jesus but were willing to go and examine the evidence for themselves have been changed from cynic to saint and believer? Think about these two individuals, author Lee Strobel and Josh McDowell. Each decided to disprove Christianity's claim. But after examining the historical evidence of the Christian faith, each became a follower of Jesus, just like Nathanael. Nathanael became a Christian by examining the evidence. He went and met Jesus. A second discipleship lesson from Nathanael's experience is this: don't argue with people, but let them meet Jesus. Show them the Gospels that tell who Jesus is. Be like the Bereans in the book of Acts, who searched the Scriptures to be sure that Jesus was the Messiah. Always direct people who are questioning Christianity, always direct them to God's Word. Then they will be like Nathanael, who came to know who Jesus really was. Nathanael said this in John chapter 1, verse 49. Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And so I invite you, come and see Jesus like Nathanael.